Building a great B2B go-to-market engine starts with understanding what works and evolving it. I'm your host, Rob Carroll, and this is a go-to-market perspective, where marketing and sales leaders share how they're transforming their organizations, foundational best practices, smart trade-offs, and practical AI delivering value and scale today. Almost every B2B marketer has an opinion in attribution, and each of those opinions was likely formed after being burned at some point. The goals of attribution are noble. Let's understand what activities are driving valuable conversions. Yet too many B2B organizations use it as an us versus them weapon that passes blame and often creates friction between sales and marketing teams. Today I'm sitting down with Nadia Davis, VP of Marketing at CaliberMind, to discuss where attribution stands today, what go-to-market leaders are still getting wrong, and whether AI is actually changing anything or just adding another layer of complexity. Nadia, welcome.
Thank you, Robert. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So why don't you quickly introduce yourself, give a little bit about your background, and then maybe describe what's going on at CaliberMind.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. So I've been in the space of revenue marketing and demand generation for going on 2 decades. And I feel like this space kind of changed the titles. Marketers love changing titles. The space itself changed titles. I started in product marketing, even though I had a demo quota. Then I was called demand generation. Then I was called performance marketing. Then the growth marketing came about. My last role was revenue marketing and marketing operations, because clearly you need to have systems and infrastructure. And here I am today, VP of marketing at CaliberMind, coming to CaliberMind from the client side, where I actually freed up my Friday evenings with can you pull that last minute report that my boss used to ask me to do every Friday when I wanted to take my kids to the Mexican restaurant. So, that was enough for me to fall in love with the solution and say, you know what, I would love to help others do the same and tell the story. So here I am today.
That's great. It's almost like you can fill out your bingo card and, yell bingo. You've had every title imaginable, it sounds.
Well, it's actually, I like that because I get to claim that I've seen, I've seen that movie one too many times, and I've seen people in different roles doing different things, even though today variety is the spice of life. I mean, companies reimagine what their marketing look like. A lot of them reimagine what attribution looks like, but I know that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm excited to talk about attribution. And I think it's always a hot topic. It's never not been a hot topic. So let's just not assume everybody listening really understands attribution. So maybe can we kind of start with like a little one-on-one definition?
Yeah.
What is attribution, and what do B2B marketers need to understand about it?
I love that. My first actually degree was in linguistics, and linguistics comes with anything that lives in a dictionary, and definitions belong in a dictionary. So if you think about attribution in itself, attribution is a way to attribute credit to marketing activities, at least that's where it started, so that marketers could say how much influence the marketing department had on revenue. And it's understandable why the need is there. Marketing departments get these large budgets that are entrusted in their care to spend and invest and allocate in the best ways possible. And all of us understand 401k. You give your money, you invest it with a company, Vanguard, Fidelity, whoever that is, right? You want a return on your investment. You want to understand, how did that money work for me? And if you think who gives you the money, it's your board, it's, your finance people. Those people very much see the world in black and white. It's no offense to them. I mean, they deal in the hard dollar. Well, marketers drive engagement. We try to win people over, change hearts, win minds, and kind of, get people to come back to us and say, I'm actually ready for a conversation with your salesperson, right? But how do you convert that engagement into revenue? And that's what attribution was designed to do. And, not to forget that originally attribution started out in the digital space. As things kind of boomed in the early 2000s, the .com thing kind of figured itself out and everybody had digital tools, Silverpop, then Marketo, then all of the other ones, right, that we all had access to. Tracking things became incredibly easy. I feel like there are many things that are easy with AI right now. They will crank down on them later, and that's where kind of attribution started seeing difficulties with all of the privacy laws, right? But early on, you could track anything and everything. Mm-hmm. And a bunch of tools figured, well, if we want people to spend money with us, here I am, Google Ads. Here I am, Facebook early days or LinkedIn in the, mid 2010s. They wanted to grade their own homework. They said, you know what? We're going to give people this attribution module that will allow them to see how well my platform is performing for them so that they can double the investment, triple the investment, take the metrics and go to the boss and say, we should invest more in this platform, right? Well, pretty quickly, people figured out that the platform can only see within its own ecosystem, within its own universe, or the Eye of Mordor can only see one kingdom within the Middle Earth, right? Mm-hmm. And people started having doubts. The whole first touch versus last touch versus middle touch. None of the marketers got education in data science because attribution is a data model. Whether you like it or not, it's one of many data models that somehow got commoditized because it became free with purchase for many tools, right? And nobody explained to you, this is where you use one model. This is where you use another model. Everybody said, wait, what's the best model? Because we love silver bullets. Like, give us a silver bullet and we will pay you whatever money you ask, right? And then the confusion reigned. Things fell apart. People have more than one platform that couldn't really report back on what attribution was doing. And here we are today with this loud voice, especially amongst the smallest companies with no kind of SMEs within the data science space. Attribution is dead, doesn't work. So that's kind of the seminar in attribution.
Right. And I think the information overload, the good versus the bad, it takes often analysis paralysis is what you achieve. And I think what we're going to be talking about in a moment is really just the attribution models. But before we get to that, it's been around for a while. As you said, it's pretty much been around since digital marketing started and you were able to even track touch points and engagement. What do you feel it's done well? What do you feel? Because, we have lots of negatives to say, or our episode title is Post-mortem or Second Act. So what's our post-mortem of what we've actually achieved with attribution to date? And then we'll get into some of the challenges as well.
Yeah, no, that's a fair place to start. I think what a lot of marketing departments struggled with historically, especially in a price space, right, is that your sales cycles, your deal cycles are incredibly long. And sometimes marketers would come to a QBR, which we're judged by the QBR. We'll live or die by the QBR, right? Mm-hmm. And you really have no story to tell of what you did last quarter because the deal is still ongoing, right? You cannot tell the sales team like where it started, whether your information accurate or, directionally accurate. You didn't collect some of the data points, right? So that's the pre kind of attribution space. Attribution allowed people to understand that there's a path that happens that's outside of the visibility window for the most obvious stuff. Nobody's shaking hands with you as the first meeting, right? Nobody just, comes to your booth at an event and said, you know what? You're so great. I'm ready to buy right now. Let me pull my wallet out. It kind of socialized this notion that there's a journey that happens outside of your purview. And it's on marketing to make sure that this information that people started to access more and more on their own, not just wait to be educated by the salesperson, is available, distributed, and exists in many channels. It also, I feel like, started preconditioning us to the notion that data hygiene and data collection practices matter. Where, I remember seeing early instances of Salesforce. It was Wild West. Like everybody had their own version of where things should go, like before that kind of, middle of the road best practice kind of got established. And, it allowed us to start, at least the best of us, being more disciplined with how we collect this data in this concept of putting this data on the timeline that something leads to something else. I feel like attribution did a good job introducing it at large.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point around just kind of, we'll talk about the buyer's journey, but even before we talk about the buyer's journey, which is happening before a lot of personal engagement, large B2B enterprise sales cycles could be 12 months to 18 months, depending on the size and complexity of the solution you're selling, which means it's, to your point, they're not showing up at your booth and signing a statement of work. They are going to have, could be dozens or more touch points. Where do you feel especially for the larger complex deals like that, forget 18 months, but even 6 months is a lot of touch points. Where do you think attribution has helped sales and marketing leaders to this point?
CaliberMind has this virtual event series that we run, Hitchhiker's Guide to Marketing Analytics. And I bring different leaders in the space that kind of have, very unique perspectives, interesting frameworks to share, like what they do within the world of marketing analytics. And I had this one woman who actually happens to be a math major, talk about having a STEM-minded person doing attribution. So that was her. And she shared this interesting concept of where she uses attribution as a proxy to collect the data, put it on the timeline, and identify different roles amongst the people that kind of are within the buying cycle or, traveling along that buyer's journey. And it allows her to create or to at least outline buying groups, right? Because companies don't buy by themselves. I mean, I cannot get anything signed. I have to bring 3 more people who would be okay to buy a $50,000 solution, right? So she said it helped her with understanding what's the makeup of the buying group. And I know we're talking today, but that's where it started. It helped people with understanding what titles are they not seeing and kind of figure out who else they need to reach out to, or which titles are evolving. So when you're talking systems and, marketing kind of efforts at large, what titles do we need to reach? So, this deeper level of analytics, just because we call it attribution, it's not just attributing the credit, but it's also collecting the data for other data exercises, which identifying buying groups is one of those.
No, that's really interesting. The fact that your ICP may be evolving, and your attribution could give you insights into that as well. So that's really cool. So you talked about first touch, last touch, mid touch. We'll hold off on multi-touch because that's another conversation we'll have. But what are the decision points when a go-to-market leadership team is trying to figure out which model should we adopt? Because you got to be consistent. You can't pick first touch for this opportunity, last touch for that opportunity. How do you come to a decision on which model you're going to work on, and how long do you use that model to see if it works?
The verbiage around we have to adopt a model always makes me smile. It's like people are making this marriage decision or mortgage decision, like this big thing, right? When in reality, when you have a data set, and that's the most important thing even before you pick a model, right? If we bring all of your data into one place, you join it, you model it, you're engineered in a way where you're not missing anything. All things relate to other things. And by the way, it's easier to say that. The real complexity of what happens, when you try to join data from different sources, that's a completely different conversation. Nobody wants to hear it, but that right there makes you humble once you see the complexities of it. But once you have all that data, why should you choose just one model? Like people are so, married to the idea it should be one model because different models answer different questions. Like that, one of the things that attracted me when I was on the customer side to CaliberMind is that I could, once my data was there, I could toggle between different models and, explore like, what do I see that's different? And when we talk about first touch, right? Let's say you're a company that wants to break into a new market. Either it's a new product line or it's a new geographical play, right? Would first touch be important? Of course, because that's how you are trying to get people to react to your marketing efforts. Out of a sudden, you see that your marketing efforts are resonating with these people. And first touch, that's your, that's your infantry hitting the ground and you see engagement, right? That would be a perfect use case for first touch, breaking into new markets. If you think about, the other scenario where for certain campaigns, and you have to know more, context about what those campaigns are, but for certain campaigns or for certain segments, you want to know what tips them over the kind of the fence, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with using last touch. There would be scenarios that are unique where this middle touch would be important, but I would be lying to you if I said that's absolutely across the board. That would be a sub-segment of your data, a uniqueness in your market that once you kind of notice that when you explore different things and, slice and dice data in different ways, you're like, that's interesting. Like, for example, there are all of these boutique, I call them boutique models, right? The W-shaped and the U-shaped. And never in my life would I ever think that I would use one of those models because the context that you have to have, like it has to be your day job, like data science and data analytics has to be a day job. And then you will be able, very confidently use those models. I was over revenue marketing operations. I had 5,000 other things in my day job. But what I noticed is that we had this specific segment. This was GovTech space, right? Specific segment where these people would come to us at an event, and that would be the kind of the first in-person experience. And then they would join our virtual events, and we were running a very strong virtual events program, but they would never join live. Like
Mhm.
you could see that pattern. They would never be joining live. And later I found out because they didn't want to be tracked. Well, little
Mhm.
did they know. They didn't want to be tracked, right? But they would join on demand. So when I saw this pattern, live event, on demand conversation within that specific segment, I could flip them over to the BDR and say, hey, look at these people. They're ready for a conversation. And sure enough, they would call on those people and they would convert to a discovery call at the highest rate. But again, this was a very unique scenario. And I think it's the contextual awareness and kind of watching for signals and layering the signals and signs that helps people choose which model do you use. But if you're trying to put all of your touches on a timeline just to see what did we do across the last 12 months, that's your even weighted model, a multi-touch model, right? But I know that's a different bullet point. So we will not touch on that just yet.
You're almost hinting at, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, you tell me where I'm wrong, that everyone should try to manage their business with multi-touch, in that should evaluate the touches that matter, and it doesn't matter if it's first or last. Is that a fair summary?
That's a brilliant summary. And what I also love about that is that people these days take it to the extreme. Well, attribution vendors are very guilty of that, where we start putting out FUD out there saying, do you know that it takes 67 touches for an opportunity to get started? No, wait, it takes 220 touches. I've seen over 400 touches. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, if you're in business of collecting touches, we're back to the days when marketing was busy with activities, when nobody could tie anything to revenue. We just wanted to tell the business, if you fire us, all of these touches will not happen. And you have to have this many touches. So that's job security. When in reality, like, you have to know, to your point, not all touches are created equal. You spamming people with ads and just getting a touch for the sake of the touch doesn't really improve your chances. But figuring out what those touches are that are important, you have to use the multi-touch model, put them on the touch line. At least you know the kind of the universe of things that you're working with.
And I could share from personal experience, a past company I worked with really tried to tackle multi-touch attribution across the customer journey. And it ended up being, as I earlier mentioned, analysis paralysis. It's so much effort to synthesize. And yes, with AI and other tools, the technology maybe has gotten better to be able to synthesize this data. That this was, 10 years ago, whatever. But it still goes back to the point of, what are you using attribution insights for? And as in my opening, my statement that it's often used as a weapon for sales and marketing to point fingers at one another. But how is it being used as a weapon? Because they're supposed to report to the board on what are you doing to bring in pipeline and convert deals. They can't use the numbers that suit them. They have to have some sort of consistency, or that reporting can't be trusted by the board. So at that level, whether that use case of being able to say, I'm trying to deliver my performance metrics and using attribution as a way to do that as a sales leader and a marketing leader, what are your thoughts there?
There's a lot in what you said. And I think one thing, it's very true that attribution plays at the performance altitude. If you think about the different decision-making levels within marketing, right? You have people with different levels of responsibilities. You have operational layer, you have strategic layer, and then you have leadership layer. If you try to really inundate the board with the operational level insights, you're going to lose them. Because you live that life in your company. They don't live that life every day, nor do they need to know the department level KPIs. I mean, it's part of your conversation. It's, a statistic that you want to bring up. But if you live and die, some companies love to say this, we're data driven, and they just watch those dashboards. We want data to tell us what to do. Well, data will not tell you what to do. You either have a strategy and you measure your progress towards achieving those goals with what you see, attribution being one of those models that would inform you. The other model would be your forecast. The other model would be your probability closing rate in Salesforce. Like, nobody talks about those models, right? Because they're a little less accessible. They're on the other side of the GTM in the sales world. The other side of this too is that, when marketing and sales do not see eye to eye, it's because the numbers don't match. We see that a lot. People come to CaliberMind, they said, you know what? We've tried it all. We kind of had this big civil war brewing because the numbers never matched. The marketing leader would say, marketing drove, and I'm making up the number, $3 million in revenue this quarter. And the salesperson like, well, that's interesting because the pipeline in Salesforce is only at $1.5 million. So where did you double your numbers, right? And at this point, it's mortifying. But it's back to the point where people use it as a means to an end, as opposed to like, let us figure out, can we even get all the data? What is the data that we can get versus what we cannot get? And to your point about analysis paralysis, I've seen so many people where they're focused on what they cannot get. The dark funnel, the dark social, and they just go on and on and on. I'm like, okay, so what do you do now? You just sit pretty and do nothing because clearly you cannot get this data point, right? But they ignore the fact that they can collect 60, 70, 80% of this data that helps them make that decision, that directional decision, right? And attribution is directional. Like if somebody told you it's a silver bullet, they would be dead wrong. It's directional. However, if you look at the scenario where you have no data, versus when you have the data, as long as you know it's accurate, it's consistent, it's pulled from all the sources, you don't have walled gardens or data silos where $1 million is spent in the channel that you cannot even bring in, right? Then it helps very much. And then the last piece that I will tell you, people use attribution as a panacea. They think that this is their crystal ball in terms of what happens across everything. Well, it tells you what marketing did over a period of the quarter, and you better include sales touches in there. If you don't have sales touches, it's just marketing patting itself on the back, right? People have to see their own efforts on the timeline of touches. Otherwise, you will not be able to build trust. And trust is ultimately what's important. It's not the alignment in the QBR room or the boardroom. It's you looking at things together over time where people see, oh, that matches. Oh, I remember this call. Oh, yeah, this event, we talked to such and such. They build trust in all of that. And a lot of people sadly don't do that part. They just use the final output, throw it on the slide, and then the aha moment happens. Oh, it doesn't match.
Yeah, it's great advice to focus on what you can measure and use that to move the business. But you mentioned the dark funnel, so we got to go there. So obviously, the buyer's journey, especially in 2026, so much happens. Customers do their own research well before they engage with the vendor. They have a problem to solve. They're going to use AI. They're going to use crowdsourcing, peer networks, social, etc. They're going to do a whole lot of work that you don't have visibility into. How do you, to your point, what is measurable outside of your own programs? And where do you say, let's not bother and just influence maybe air cover for those types of environments?
Actually, let me take us back to the early 70s, to the world of consumers. When advertising became very popular across all the consumer brands, billboards were everywhere, radio ads were everywhere, TV ads were everywhere. This was marketing before the digital world and personal computers. The budgets were still there. The agencies were still charging money, right? But you could not really measure anything. So when you think about the dark funnel, that was truly the dark funnel, even though it was in the middle of the day, right in the world of consumers. So what smart people decided to do, they knew that they had revenue for products by whatever region, by store, whatever that metric was. And they knew how much they were spending on all of these different channels, right? So the marketing mix modeling came about. In marketing mix modeling, yet another data model. It does not look at individual touches. It does not care what this individual person level interaction, when it happens and how much it's worth, right? Per click or per visit. It looks at trends and variations in data sets and how revenue changes when the spend changes with all the multiple channels. When people look at dark social, if you know what you're investing and you see the fluctuations in revenue, you can use marketing mix modeling as a way to understand channels that you cannot measure. I mean, privacy came about, 50% of your, maybe 60% of all of your website traffic now under GA4, when it came out 2 years ago, you cannot even identify who those people are, right? You cannot use them in the reports. The reports show you 40% accuracy of what's happening, counting your traffic. So it's like, it's here, right? You always operate on a subset of data, but you have to understand when you are measuring this other thing that you're dying to measure, is it because it's interesting or is it because it's useful? And if it's useful, how are you going to use it? And to me, if you're investing a lot in these dark channel, the dark social, dark funnel, you might decide that I want to use marketing mix modeling, which completely is detached from systems. It's more spend data and multiple rows of data and years of data. But that's going further into the data science world. Marketers just get, deer in the headlights look when you start explaining this concept to them, because everybody's so tied to fields and systems and touches and web activity. But that's truly something that was pioneered in a similar scenario. And that's something that I see marketers use more and more.
Yeah, what you're really talking to is there's a lot of correlation versus causation analysis. And you're like, are we, with the investments we're making, and again, this is things like brand and out of home and, social and analyst influence, even analyst relations and PR. These are things that they hopefully, if they're doing something right, will drive demand, but they're not going to definitely drive leads. And it's very often leadership doesn't understand the difference between demand generation and lead generation. I really like the fact that if you're making these investments in your marketing mix across these different, we'll call them these darker channels, and you're seeing better quality leads, higher conversion rates, whatever, then you must be doing something right.
If you have a marketing leader who is data savvy and who has data affinities, and I feel like in B2B and technology specifically, that's the only type of leader that will survive the shift towards, data and code and anything AI and everything AI. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to also drive data literacy in your organization. So you're the data leader, ultimately helping people understand what's happening. If you assume that everybody knows as much as you do, well, good luck, expecting sales to understand all of these nuances. Like, you literally have to present a story. And that data storytelling is the skill that is very much in demand, but not everybody can wrap their mind around, how do I even look at the charts that I do have and tell people what's happening?
Exactly. And you raised a point earlier, which I really liked, is that attribution's a metric. It's not the thing. It's not the end all be all. It's not the only thing you should be worrying about. So in that vein, how do you educate leadership? Assume we're talking to marketing leaders that are trying to educate their CEO, their CRO, and other board members, et cetera, on where attribution should fit in their conversations. What do you recommend?
To me, attribution sits within the marketing department. If the CFO wants to parachute in and have in-depth kind of inspection exercise of how investments at the campaign level are performing, because, I don't know, an increase of more than X was asked for and they really want to justify that and they truly understand, that's the perfect place. But it sits at the operational level. Mm-hmm. It helps you shift your investment on short-term basis because it's very much the metric that you can have in real time. Campaign is running. Do we have an output? Do we not have an output? Do we have the right touches? Do we not have the right touches, right? And then, of course, you wait for the sales cycle, of course, but you can see certain things in real time. It helps you optimize things. It helps you get intelligence from engagement from your customer pool. It helps you understand the buyer's journey and give something to your salespeople for them to engage quicker. So speed to lead is important, right? But it's definitely not a metric when you talk about the CEO level kind of conversation, or maybe even like, executive leadership conversation, other than kind of a statistic that is mentioned when a point is being made. If you're asking for, long-term planning, attribution is not the metric that would really play well with it. And then the person who is translating what they see within this attribution, they have to drive education of what to expect, where it's not this model or that model. They have to use a model within the context of what the goal is. And at the CEO level, the conversation should be, we as a business have a revenue goal. People just came out of all of their SKOs and RKOs. So now it's not just sales kickoff, it's revenue kickoff. Okay, whatever. They came out of those. Everybody saw the huge number. And I remember myself walking out of those, I'm like, okay, wow, sales have a lot to do this year, right? Because it's not, how can a content manager even fathom what their contribution to this huge number is? Right. How can a social media person wrap their mind around this huge number, right? Like, all right, the sales team got a lot to do this year. We're just going to help them. And that's the end of the conversation. But in reality, if you break it down to the level of marketing department contribution, usually that's known 50% marketing, 50% sales, or 70% marketing, 30% sales. You're going to get that because people are trying to estimate headcount and kind of department spend, those kind of things, like it's needed. Okay, well, then you take that number, figure out what your piece of the pie is. Then you know what your average size of the opportunity is. Do the little division exercise. You get to the total number of opportunities that you need to drive. And then you know that all of the people on your marketing team, they're masters of their channel. Your social media person knows how many conversions happen from XYZ. Your web person knows how many forms get submitted from direct and organic and what pages convert better. So you can consult on the content to the content person. Your events person know how many demos come from an event on average. And out of a sudden, you can divide that huge number at the opportunity count level to each individual person's contribution. That is the story that the CEO wants to hear. They want to hear, like, what is the framework that we're going to use? Don't tell me that one touch is worth $3 or whatever it is, right? Like, they don't want to care. They don't want to hear about the minutia. They want to hear that you know what the map towards the goal looks like, and you're confident that your people will be able to achieve it.
For the data-driven marketing leaders and marketing ops folks that actually are using this data to help provide direction and to get a sense of how these investments are paying off and where you might want to rebalance your mix. What parts of attribution are now more or less commoditized, and where are you actually seeing innovation happening in the world of data analysis and attribution?
I think the single channel attribution or in-channel attribution measurement is something that people roll their eyes at this point, because HubSpot got it, Google Ads got it, Meta got it, but within their own kind of a ecosystem. So people don't trust that. And I think when they say it doesn't work, that's exactly the first kind of thing that comes to their mind. I think this notion that, one model is better than the other also kind of is starting to get old, because people have seen it. They've seen different companies trying to do it and it doesn't work. In a lot of cases, people building attribution in-house, we work with a lot of data scientists. I'm currently enrolled in a data science master's program at Georgia Tech. So it's very humbling once you see kind of all of the underlying things, the complexities that you got to solve that people don't see on the outside. But like a lot of companies with multiple data systems, like truly, quarantined off corrals of data that are hard to access, tried to build attribution modeling and failed, miserably. We had customers who said, we tried to build ourselves 4 times. It failed. So here we are now talking to you and buying you so that we can, outsource it. This notion of build versus buy, a lot of people like giddy to build, but once they kind of see the complexities and they need to maintain, they need to innovate, they need to constantly allocate resources to it, they shift towards a platform provider. But at the same time, they're also wary of the vendors who can only do superficial stuff and grab data from select few sources, but not really solve for enterprise level complexity. When you got, multiple CRM instances, when you have legacy data from different marketing automation platforms that is in a different format. So that's where kind of the wariness of the market comes in. And then if you talk about small businesses, like, we just kind of spend a minute on small businesses. These people always hear the term. They may have worked at bigger companies where it was used in some shape or form, successfully or not. They come to a small company where they have limited resources, cheap or lowest tier of, system subscriptions. And they just get desperate because it's one marketer or 2 people trying to do everything at the same time. Clearly, attribution is not something they have the time for, so it just fails. And they're the loudest to scream on LinkedIn. But when I look at the big companies, at enterprises that have long-term strategies, they spend large or make large bets, they have large budgets, Google ad spend in the millions of dollars per quarter. Like that's where they start paying attention to attribution, and they start really investing in their data and have data strategy and people who are on the data side of things within data science and data analytics. And CaliberMind puts out State of Attribution report every year where we kind of take the survey of the market, research the state of attribution, and kind of see how it evolved, if any, and, kind of track innovation within it. So this year's report will be released here shortly within the next couple of weeks in April. And what we found out in this report actually was very enlightening. Not surprising, but truly enlightening, where we looked at bigger companies and we interviewed them, and they said, if you don't have clarity in your go-to-market strategy, if you don't have defined goals of where you're moving towards, attribution is not going to do a whole lot for you, because you're looking for answers from an attribution model, which is a backwards looking model. So you're looking to the past to learn the future. It doesn't work. Instead, use it as a compass, because it helps you, direct your strategy to achieve the goal that you set out. Well, that's great. And then they also said, unless your company is committed to data hygiene, data excellency, I guess, you're not going to get far with attribution, because it's only as good as the data that it has. If you have partial data, if you have data that is erroneous, was not entered right, the timelines are all over the place, it's doubtful that you will get anything meaningful. So even though it sounds cheesy, garbage in, garbage out, but truly that's the notion. So until you invest and feel committed to data excellency at the organizational level, attribution may not be the model that will, give you a whole lot, because that's what it takes to get good output.
Well, you're speaking to someone with 20 plus years in the data management space. So garbage in, garbage out has been my life.
I'm glad it resonates.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It really doesn't sound that great. But no, it's such an important discipline, and it's still trust in data is paramount. And now we have AI, which is creating this layer of uncertainty, because you're getting answers quicker, but suddenly from your advanced analytics, you got to a point of really high trust. Now, when you're getting those answers from AI, you're like, is it hallucinating? How do I trust it? So let's ask that question of attribution. And, we'd love to hear if your study included AI, but where do you see AI changing or improving attribution workflows?
Actually, can we take one quick step back when you mentioned data, and then we will go back to the AI piece? I feel like when people talk about data, for so many marketers and even salespeople, people in general outside of the data department, it is such an abstract term. When you say data hygiene, they have no clue what that means. They know it's just a bunch of boring people in glasses doing some stuff with machine learning, even if they know the term. They absolutely have no clue about any of the programming languages, any of the data formats, data joins. None of that crosses their mind. They just think, I'm glad it's not me. And yet, this is sadly the foundation of your success or failure. So to me, I thought it was always ironic.
Yeah, well, you can always come back to data. Forget the broader confusing data governance. It's simply these folks that are trying to make decisions. Can I access my data? Is it complete? Is it duplicated? Is there missing information? Does it need to be enriched with information from other places that I hadn't considered? And if you don't answer all those questions, what are you making your decisions based on?
Yeah, that's very fair. So, if we go back to your AI question, what I have seen AI to be used for erroneously is the notion that if I download a bunch of CSVs and give it to ChatGPT or whatever other LLM, it's going to put all this data together and tell me what it is that I need to know. There's a lot of tools that showed up in the attribution space that with AI agents crawling all of your data, making decisions, giving you output. It's all good and great. But what all of that lacks is context. And without that layer of context, what you get back is truly meaningless. And I will explain myself. First, you want to make sure that whatever your AI is looking at, first of all, it's not like just a random public model, right? I remember when ChatGPT was a new hot thing, I was trying to, do some of the data analysis, downloaded a bunch of stuff from Salesforce, put it in there. And before I hit the go button, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should go ask InfoSec about that just to be compliant so I don't get in trouble. Well, they smacked me on the hand so fast. I never got the results from the ChatGPT output, right? Mm-hmm. So that was my experience. But people, I feel like, got more relaxed. Like nobody tells you right now, don't put your Salesforce data schema into ChatGPT. You're expected to know that, but so many people forget. But again, if you deploy AI on a data set, right? you better do it within the tool that is currently at the center of your go-to-market kind of a universe. And it's the AI that is built into that tool where all of the governance, all of the, security protocols have already been met by the vendor. So that AI sits within that tool and looks at the data that resides within the data warehouse within that tool. I mean, at least that's the philosophy of CaliberMind, right? We have all of your data. We have all of your go-to-market data. It's in BigQuery. We deploy Gemini against that data, but it already has been modeled. AI does not have to deal with numbers. It is not good at numbers. If it was good with numbers, they would call it large numbers model. It's called large language model. It treats data as text. So it looks for patterns. So you give it a bunch of CSVs and it will start looking for patterns, and it's phenomenal with patterns. But does that mean that an MQL over here means the same as an MQL over there, an MQL elsewhere? And that's where the context piece comes in, right? So that contextual relationship is very important. When CaliberMind came out with our AI agent, I thought it was brilliant how our data team kind of thought about the whole notion of, how do we want to deploy AI and how can we get the output? Our version of agentic analytics, it does not run math on the numbers. It's not going to run formulas for you. Mm-hmm. Instead, it takes the natural language inquiry and converts it into SQL. And it runs the query and brings it back in SQL, and then our tool converts it back into numbers so that everything matches. All of your data definitions is within your context, and your numbers actually mean something that aligns with your go-to-market strategy. So I know it's kind of, they're out there in the weeds, but to me, the use of AI for attribution specifically has to be rooted in the context. And if you cannot guarantee that this probabilistic model will make assumption based on patterns of, 5s and 3s and 1s and 0s in your data set, then you're just opening yourself to doubt, to sales saying that the numbers don't match, to double counting or whatever it is. So this notion of deterministic AI, still following the business rules, to me is the only way that you should use AI for the, attribution intelligence.
And similar to your earlier point about single channel attribution, there's a lot of single channel LLMs and AIs. So do you really have that single golden LLM for all of your enterprise activities that can really make the best recommendations? I don't even know if we're there yet. So I think
very true. And as fast as they change, what was there yesterday may not be there tomorrow, but exactly. You still got to report on some kind of continuity in numbers.
Exactly. So you mentioned your state of marketing attribution market study. Any other key teasers you'd like to share of what folks can expect from the report? Like any data points that really surprised you?
It was enlightening to see that so many leaders within larger companies are very mindful of the expectations that they can set from what they can get from attribution. And the fact that they understood the importance of educating the rest of the business on what numbers mean. CaliberMind started talking about data storytelling probably a year and a half ago. And it's very kind of heartwarming to see that other people within the pool of the companies that we interviewed are really paying attention to the importance of being able to tell that story. Because you look at a report and you don't know whether up is good or down is good. Well, what do you mean? Up is always good. It's up and to the right. That's what all the corporate jargon teaches you, up and to the right. Well, what if that up means number of days that the lead is sitting waiting for the sales team to take it, right? Then up is not good. So that contextual kind of awareness and translating what the graphs and charts mean is very important. And then the other piece that kind of stood out to me is that the notion of democratizing data insights, but within the boundaries of each individual role in the go-to-market team, is kind of becoming that front and center thought for many marketing leaders, where they want people to have access to data that helps them understand, am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a good job? Right? Without kind of somebody giving you that 6-month review. But at the same time, these people should never have access to more data, because otherwise it's, paralysis by analysis, like what you just described. And the fact that people start seeing things that are not really relevant to their roles, so it kind of gets them very scatterbrained and kind of, distracted and taken the wrong direction. So those two things tell me that companies are really pivoting from access to data free for all for the sake of having access to data, and start getting really strategic in terms of who gets what, and then allowing people to understand what those numbers even mean.
So net, do you feel that practitioners that are actually leveraging attribution data effectively, that they're delivering value for their orgs?
I think those same practitioners should first ask a question. What can we expect from the output once we have all the data? Then you have that benchmark, and then your answers become extremely valuable, extremely enlightening for the organization, whether you're going in the right direction. But if you don't set that goal, then you're kind of sitting there waiting for an interesting stat or a curious fact, but you don't really know how to apply it. And we've seen that too. People that don't have that organizational level goal, or the marketing leader does not set specific goals and strategy, they really use this as a justification tool. That's something that was mentioned in the report as well. Just a justification of marketing, getting paid the next month. Well, that's not the right use of it. That's where you start civil wars and the fight for credit and all of those things, right? It should be a unified effort moving towards achieving organizational goals. And this is your operational level insight of whether or not you're spending money the right way and going in the right direction.
Great advice. So, and this isn't just for attribution, but know what questions you're trying to answer and why, and then worry about operationalizing it. But if you're operationalizing it to hope that you'll find value, is not necessary, to your earlier point, cart before the horse. Know what you're trying to solve first.
I feel like people have the hardest time with finding the right questions to ask. They want someone to ask the question so they know what to glob onto to expand further, but it's asking the right questions and knowing what you can ask and what data is available that may or may not answer your question. Maybe that question should not even be asked because you don't have anything to support the answer. And then it kind of, opens up its own, what do we do next with it? But yeah, to your point, the smartest people know how to ask the right questions and then find the right people who can get them the answers or create an infrastructure that would produce the answers when the time comes.
That's awesome. Well, Nadia, thank you so much. The State of Marketing Attribution study said it'll be out mid-April, give or take, on CaliberMind's website.
Yep, it will be right there on CaliberMind.com. You come to the first page. We will make sure that there's either a banner or a pop-up. You will not miss it.
I have no doubt, and I'm probably going to reach out to you again because I'm writing an article all about how much I love owned data as a marketer. I can't wait to read the report and learn more about it. So, Nadia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Robert, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for the conversation.